And with humanitarian, you may be hearing in the news about, we have many asylum seekers at the border right now, or that have been coming at the border and have been denied, or we hear our administration talking about them as illegals, but it is not illegal to apply for asylum. So even if you might qualify for one of those categories, it's extremely difficult. And then there's people who don't even qualify for those categories. And so the other myth about people getting in line, saying why aren't people getting in line? Why aren't they just doing the right thing? Is that for many people there is no way to come into the United States under our immigration system or in a way that accommodates them. Also, I want to talk a little bit about just kind of our current policy environment under this administration, and more generally in Michigan. So in the last 2 years, year and a half, I'm sure you've been hearing the news and some of these things. Currently, we're really experiencing the effects of the zero tolerance policy. So if you've been hearing about children separated from their parents at the border, people being prosecuted for illegal entry, those are effects of the zero tolerance policy. And then there's the Muslim ban, which unfortunately the most recent version just got upheld by the Supreme Court. The immigration enforcement executive orders, which were kind of saying who was priority, and they really for enforcement and deportation, and they really expanded that definition. There's also our refugee numbers. We used to take in about 100,000, and those have been cut in half. DACA was terminated and is still being litigated whether anybody will be able to continue to benefit. I mentioned the public charge threat earlier. And then we have openly racist rhetoric about who makes a good American coming from our administration. And so it's a very harsh environment that we're facing right now. At the state and local level, we do still have, we have an Arab American voting bloc that of kind of new Americans, but they're not monolithic. And we also have an emerging Asian and Latino voting bloc in Michigan. At the executive level, like all the same. So you might be surprised about, it's been a very interesting, experience, I guess, or to see, who a lot of that Arab American population voted for, and then kind of what's happened with Trump and with the executive orders, but also in Michigan we experienced, it happened nationwide, where the Iraqi population was rounded up that had been here for a significant amount of time. It happened last year. They'd been here for 20, 30 years after deportation orders because they weren't sending people back to Iraq, and the policy changed and they rounded up all the Iraqis, and so there was a lot of differing opinions in the Arab American community as to whether they should have trusted Trump or not in response to that raid. And the cases for all of those people, it was a few thousand nationwide, we had a few hundred in Michigan, and that are still fighting their cases today, fighting against deportation. And then at the executive level in Michigan, we have a pro-immigrant governor from an largely anti-immigrant party. So there's generally some dissonance, and kind of we've seen things that are kind of both very pro-immigrant, some less pro-immigrant from our governor on occasion. But there's a few good things that he's created, like the Office of New Americans as a Michigan office to work on these things. We also have the Michigan legislature. So we have New American Leaders, it's kind of a subgroup within the legislature who is advancing positive priorities. And we also have had some harsh legislation towards immigrants. And so there's constantly, even though we're not making immigration policy in Michigan, there's a lot of policy that gets created that affects immigrants in one way or another, relating to things like should local municipalities be able to cooperate with immigration enforcement, or should people who have DACA or no immigration status be able to benefit from licenses, things like that, or things that happen at the Michigan legislature that affect positively or negatively our immigrant community. We also have 20 plus welcoming cities and counties, including Grand Rapids is one of those, where the local government has signed on to say we want to be welcoming to immigrants, and there's certain principles and ideals, and Merck has some staff that are part of the larger national program that called Welcoming America, and they work with the local offices to try to help them understand what is a good policy to put forth. And just a quote here that I'll share with you. So, people move. There is no other way. We can recognize the human right to migration. We can recognize that we ourselves, all of us, doubly migrants. We are migrants historically. Our ancestors came from somewhere else and originated long ago in the same spot in Africa. And we are migrants personally. Life is the experience of moving through time, of abandoning each present moment for the next, of temporal migration. Acknowledging this, we can accept that we have no right to forbid or stigmatize migration. We have only the power to try to do so. And we ought to endeavor to use that power as little as we can manage and less over time. For we are using it to deny the human right of others. It is we, those who stop migration, who are the criminals, not those who are migrants. And slowly, at a pace that does not terrify us, but whose direction is clear, we must gradually let go and allow things to change. Only in doing so can we hope to build a world in accordance with the values we claim to believe in: liberty, equality, democracy, and wash clean the taste of hypocrisy that burns so bitter in the mouths of so many of our mouths. So with that, I can conclude the very, very brief kind of glimpse into our immigration system. And it has some white text on it, but we'll go into the Know Your Rights part. Briefly, does anybody have any questions on that portion? And we can also get into more depth if you want to wait to hear what we say in Know Your Rights before any questions. Okay. So again, this is in the you, second person. So this is what we would typically share with anybody who is not a citizen and is wondering what rights they have and how to exercise those rights. So regardless of immigration status, everybody has rights under the Constitution, under our other laws that exist. And especially with interacting with law enforcement. That's our biggest concern for most non-citizens, the biggest point of worry. So that's what we will spend a lot of time talking about. So we want to prepare people on an individual basis, but also to be able to protect their families. And so obviously no matter what status someone has, they can have an interaction with immigration enforcement, and they can have, there's a possibility that somebody could get detained, but the risk is highest for somebody who has no immigration status. So the first key is prevention. So being ready, we recommend people keep copies of their immigration documents in their house, all together, gathered in one place where they know about, and ideally if they can have two, one with somebody they trust, but otherwise knowing where that is in their house so they can easily tell someone, please go get this for me if I need it. They should memorize their A number. So an A number is, A stands for alien, unfortunately, but that's what our system uses to identify if anybody's ever been in immigration proceedings, if they've ever been caught by immigration, even if they had a case that was resolved, if they ever had a visa, they will have an A number. So they should memorize that, and their family members or their kind of trusted person should memorize that number. It will be on any immigration papers they have, so if you have access to that, that's fine. But if they go into, if somebody's detained, they may not have access to their papers at that moment. But that A number is really important because names will get misspelled, people could have the same name, so there's some systems you can use to try to locate somebody when they've been detained, but the A number is the best way to do that. And if they do have an active case that maybe isn't on the negative side of being detained, but maybe they're trying to get a visa or something like that, you're going to use the A number to track that too. We recommend that people consult with an immigration attorney now before anything happens in their life, because they might have some options, and they may be options that they may not be able to partake of at that moment. They might have to be in immigration proceedings to take advantage of all the benefits. But it's best that they know, because once you are detained or are in immigration proceedings, the clock is ticking really quickly, and they may not know or have the time to look or have as an easy of a process of accessing an attorney, especially if you are detained. There's not detention centers everywhere in Michigan. Our most common one is in Calhoun County, so Battle Creek. And so if, for someone to get there and meet with them is quite a process versus just showing up at an attorney's office when you have the time to do so now. And for permanent residents who are eligible, we really, really strongly suggest naturalizing. Because U.S. citizens cannot be deported, and they should not be detained by immigration either. There have been some instances where that has happened, but it's been more because of a lack of ability to prove the citizenship. But if a permanent resident who is convicted of a crime, certain crimes can lose their permanent residency. And so we really encourage people to naturalize as soon as they can. For most people, that's 5 years after they've gotten their permanent residency. For people who got their permanent residency through marriage, it's 3 years. And then preparing your children. So regardless of the status of the children, it's important to have a conversation with them about what, that this is a reality, that a parent could be detained, explaining what's happening, and obviously it has to be appropriate to the child's age and understanding. But as with any sort of detention or unexpected absence, if a child has an understanding of what could happen and is prepared for that, it's going to be a lot easier than suddenly their parent is gone and they don't know why. And if your child is, if they're a U.S. citizen, regardless of their citizenship, it's important that they have passports to be able to travel. If they're a citizen of more than one country, getting passports from first obtaining the dual citizenship. So most countries allow children to get the citizenship of their parents' country, even if they were born in the U.S. And that's important in some countries because you may not be able to use all of the benefits of schooling and enrolling in schooling. And I think Mexico is one of those countries that if the parents, if the child is born in the U.S., they'll be entitled to U.S. citizenship. Parents are Mexican, then they can ask for their child to have Mexican citizenship as well. And it can be done later on if the child goes to Mexico with a parent, but it really simplifies the process if they already have that citizenship, already have that passport, so that if they have to return with a parent to Mexico or they choose to return together, that they can just seamlessly register the child in school, get medical services, etc. And then registering with the consulate if they're not a citizen. You can still make that child known so that later procedures are simpler. And when someone pays their taxes, they should declare all of their children. It is a very strong temptation to buy a social security number. Many people want to pay their taxes even if they are not citizens. And there is something called an ITIN. I forget what it all stands for, ITIN, but it's an alternate tax number. So if you don't have a social security number, you can apply for this. You don't have to, there's no connection to immigration status for this ITIN number, but you can apply for the ITIN number and then file for your taxes with the ITIN number instead of a social security number, and just continue to do that to pay your taxes. Any form of employment will accept an ITIN for tax purposes. Doesn't mean you have authorization to work necessarily, but it does allow you to file your taxes honestly and not ever be in danger of having committed tax fraud. And we recommend people also not sell or share their children's numbers with someone else. And then avoiding encounters is one of the best ways to be prepared. Obviously there are many situations in which one is just driving about and there's not anything one can do to know when immigration is going to be nearby, but there are a few places we know they definitely are at, and so the Ambassador Bridge and the Blue Water Bridge are points of entry and exit into the country, and so but there are also some roads that once you get on them, you cannot turn around, and you have to go to the bridge. You have to go to the port of entry. There was a very unfortunate situation a number of years ago where there was a bus from here, from Grand Rapids, going to the Mexican consulate to process some passports and things like that, and the bus driver got a little turned around, ended up on one of those roads in Detroit, and the whole bus ended up at the port, at the immigration port of entry, and they were generally able to get most people out and back into the country without issue, but a few people were otherwise detained that had not been on immigration's radar. So that was just generally avoid those areas if people can. And then notarios. So notarios are notaries. In Latin America, many notaries are also attorneys. It's kind of a dual vocation or career, and the titles are pretty synonymous. And so there is a opportunity that many people unfortunately take advantage of in the US to become notaries, which is just paying a bond and being able to witness someone's signature in the US, but use the term in a deceitful way to Spanish speakers and pretend to be attorneys or have the right to fill out immigration forms. And often immigration is extremely complex, even when we have received a lot of training on it. And so they can, one, it's unlawful for a notario to do that, but also they're usually scamming these people. So we really want to warn people against notarios. There are receiving free services or low-cost services is difficult because most of the agencies that do that are pretty full, but we really recommend that people reach out to one of the nonprofits. And we have a referral number, so even if it's a case that we can't take due to capacity or the area that we work in, we have a referral list of private and nonprofit practitioners, so we really recommend use that when working with someone so they don't just go to a random person. And even there are bad attorneys, unfortunately. I mean, that might be very commonly known to most people because of TV and stuff, but there are some bad immigration attorneys out there. So on our list that we keep, we definitely keep those people off. We can't bet that everybody is, everything that they do is perfect, but we know that there are some who are involved in deceiving people, taking their money and not doing a good job on their cases, and it has a devastating effect. And so those people generally lose their license to practice law, but we keep them off our list. So if you need to refer someone to an immigration attorney, please call our number and we'll get you that list, or we can potentially take a case ourselves depending on the type. So that's kind of the preparation point. So then we're looking at encounters with immigration enforcement. So the big thing is to not lie, not give a false name or a document to an employer or a government agent. But people don't have to give their immigration status. So this is under the right to remain silent. The case law has determined you do have to give your name. So just give, if someone has an encounter, just give their name and their true name, and as full of a name as they can, because again, if they haven't had an A number before, someone's going to try to locate them, so you want to make sure they have that full, accurate name. But they don't have to talk about their immigration case. They don't have to say where they're from, what status they have, and they have the right to consult with an immigration attorney before talking or making any decisions. Unfortunately, the attorneys are not provided to them, as in the criminal context. They have to provide that themselves, which is why it's good to have consulted with an attorney previously, and if they think they're going to get detained, have that person's name and number ready. Like I said, they don't have to say what country they're from, and they should use their full name with government agents. And if they use a false name, in addition to potentially causing other problems with the immigration case, it'll be very difficult for people to find them. So in the house, so we have probably all heard of police officers having warrants and having the right to enter homes. Immigration enforcement, or ICE, has a type of warrant, but it's an administrative warrant, but it has to be signed by a judge. And the reality is that they rarely ever have that. And so usually they'll show something that was signed by their supervisor or someone in the office, and for the purposes of allowing entry into a home, it is useless. So they'll show it and people will get confused or intimidated, but you do not have to allow entry into a home, whether it's a family member. And I've had social workers ask me in the past, what do you do if I'm in the home? And they come, but it's the homeowner's decision, or the renter, whoever is in